Our clothing, like a mirror, reflects the history of civilization. Today, it is more than just a shell. Fashion and style have become a new way of self-expression. To see deep symbolism in material things and speak with their clothing, personal belongings, and rituals. That is what Kazakhs are famous for. This is why history of a national costume is a whole new astonishing world, revealing the very essence of our mentality. Starting from the end of 90s, Kazakhstan is regularly hosting fashion weeks, where designers and couturiers present their collections that often feature national clothes, usually in modern rendition. Thus, we can observe how national costume is evolving. However, there was a period in the history of our country when ethnical elements were not held in high esteem. Moreover, they were considered as old-fashioned. And only because of our artists' works, we now can study the history of a national costume. Great artists have always been famous for capturing not just their mere impressions or understanding of one phenomenon or another, but also for being able to capture the period they have lived in. Culture, morals, way of living, and clothes artists' contemporaries were wearing. When and where can we trace the first depictions of the national costumes? And when for the first time have nomads appeared on travelers' paintings and drawings? Let's find out in this episode. From the very moment humans appeared on the face of the earth, they have always wanted to capture the world around them. Some early petroglyphs dated back to the Paleolithic are still of the great interest to modern scholars. Initially, these paintings were symbolic, depicting hunting scenes or featuring certain animals. Over time, as the societies evolved, painting started to evolve too. It entailed appearance of various styles and movements, and artists' skills reached unprecedented heights. Rightfully, both Egyptian and Greek art are considered as the most ancient and astonishing ones. Survived drawings of the first artists allow us to recreate the image of ancient Greeks and Egyptians, as well as understand more about their traditions, culture, and history of costumes. Essentially, ancient Greek costume was a unisex clothing, male and female. First thing they were wearing was the eximus. It was a rectangular piece of linen, stitched together on the left shoulder, leaving some space for the arms. Over chiton, Greek women would wear a peplos, a large and loose chiton. These were two rectangular linens draped in different ways. The thing is that mainland Greek clothing wasn't stitched. They were not sewing it together. The main idea was a drapery. It is also believed that all the clothing was mainly white. This stereotype is probably based on the appearance of the Greek marble statues. However, this wasn't the case. The Greeks loved vivid colors, so they dyed their clothes in different colors. The most luxurious and fine one was purple. This color was highlighting person's status. It was obvious that if a man was wearing purple clothes, he was a rich person. Where does Greek painting live? It lives on vases. Vase painting is a unique art. It is more graphic, kind of stylization. From vase paintings, we can understand the main focus of a Greek artist. A man has always been his main focus. What kind of man? It is always a young, athletic, beautiful man. Ancient Egyptians had a different perception of art. The main feature of their paintings was the effect of monumentality. The drawings were made directly on the walls with bas-reliefs with explanatory hieroglyphics captions next to them. Artists in ancient Egypt had the only task to perpetuate the deceased. Painter was working in accordance with strict rules that required regular geometric shapes, so the depiction of a person was flat, with no depth or perspective, so the human figure looked distorted and surreal. Egyptian art was a canonical one. It was all about the rules, and the rules were pretty fixed. Egyptian artist was never working with a model, like a Greek artist, for instance. He knew the rules, he knew proportions. He was a mathematician. He adhered to certain measures, but his depiction of a man has always been flat. He was combining different angles in one painting. Why would he do that? Because he realized that this was a wall painting. He did this because he wanted people to see from the distance what was the painting of a pharaoh. That's why pharaohs were the biggest. And of course, we know Egyptian artistic rules. Side view of a face, front view of an eye. Shoulders were usually drawn in front view. They looked more expressive this way. Arms and legs were drawn in side view. A graphic example of this kind of painting is a hunting in the marshes of the Nile. Illustration from the Tomb Chapel, located in Thebes. It is dated back to 15th to 14th century BC, and the drawing is a great example of Egyptian artistic craftsmanship. As Olga Baturina explains, Pharaoh is wearing pleated skirt made of linen. On his head, we see a complex wig. Also, he is wearing makeup and jewelry. For 1,000 years, Egyptian clothes remained the same. Men were wearing a kilt-like garment called shendyt. It was worn by everyone, from slaves and commoners to pharaohs. Shendyt was worn around the waist. For more than 3,000 years, it didn't change a single bit. However, it wasn't a sewn garment, it was a piece of cloth draped around man's waist. There were some differences during the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. The way shendyt was draped were different, and these differences can be easily identified by a certain period. But shendyt remained shendyt. As for women, they would wear a simple sheath dress called kalasaris. That's it. Egyptian history didn't think of anything more than this. However, it gets different. The richer a person were, the more pieces of clothing he would wear. Instead of one shendyt, he could wear several. Some of them might be ankle length. 10 shendyts? Here you are. They would also wear so-called tunic, a square piece of cloth with a hole for the neck. The wigs were very common too. They all were made of natural hair, sometimes dyed hair. They were of different forms, embellished with fabrics and gems. For commoners, wigs were made of sheep wool. In Asia, people had their own preferences in art and fashion. Japan, for instance, was famous for its woodblock prints, ukiyo-e. Some of them feature women wearing kimonos and sporting various head ornaments, combs, and hairpins. China also had its own art canons. The basis of it was a linear image. Its appearance was influenced by Chinese calligraphy. A person would usually be depicted in national costume with a nature in the background. Japanese and Chinese costumes have always borne symbolical and encoded meaning. They would highlight person's status, as color symbolism in China has always been very strict. If we are talking about ancient China, yellow color was worn only by the emperor. No one else was allowed to choose it. It is a color of the sun, emperor's color. Japan and China. Well, of course, China is the ancestor. Its history begins earlier than the history of Japan. However, they have influenced one another enormously. That's why their costumes are so similar. Obi sash, kimono, uncomfortable women footwear, wooden shoes that make one to take short, menacing steps. Costume has always reflected certain ages or people's beauty ideals. Fabric painting, a trend that is very popular today, has come to China from Indonesia. Instead of canvas, Oriental artists used silk, which is ideal basis for painting. Later, the art of painting on silk, batik, spread throughout the world, having undergone certain changes. After our extensive journey in different countries, I suggest coming back home. So, in what ways the history of Kazakh costume was reflected in local art? Who were the people depicting our national lifestyle? It is believed that the first description of the Kazakh costume was made by the Ottoman historian Seyfi Çelebi in the 17th century. Their kaftans are made of sheepskin. They are dyed in different colors to resemble satin. They are brought to Bukhara and sold at the same price as satin kaftans, for they look elegant and beautiful. Also, they have these amazing capes made of sheepskin. They are completely waterproof and aren't prone to dampness. All of this because of certain herbs that were used to polish the skin. Clothing style of nomads was defined mostly by weather conditions and their lifestyle. Nomadic civilization has introduced pants and tight wrap jackets to the world. Talking of nomads, let's look at Saka period. For instance, not far away from the city of Issyk, there is the Issyk Kurgan, a Saka tumulus dated back to the 5th century. The golden warrior, the golden man, one of the main symbols of our state. Essentially, these tight pants tucked into boots, short jacket, and this tall headwear. It can be said that over time, the hat has become a part of female wardrobe and was transformed into saukile. In the 19th century, Central Asia was a place of lots of research and scientific expeditions, attracting numerous foreign travelers and artists. It is because of their sketches and drawings we can trace the transformation of the Kazakh costume. Artists were extremely meticulous in depicting national traditions, lifestyle, everyday routine, tools, and of course, costumes. Things that travelers found exotic were regular for nomadic people. Painting as an art was born here, in the vast land of Eurasia, literally a century ago. Before that, arts were different. They were applied arts, ornaments, and repoussage. These still were the arts, but different. As for the easel painting, it has appeared not so long ago, in 20s to 30s of the 20th century. And it was a borrowed, appropriated practice. One of the most prominent artists of the 19th century was Vasily Vereshchagin. He has a lot of works featuring nomadic people. He was drawing them while he was traveling in Semirache. Do you remember that famous painting showing guards waiting for Timur? How colorful their clothes are. Party-colored, with ornaments, boots showing under their robes, turbans on their heads. The men are holding weapons. Characters look so realistic that it makes one want to stretch their hand and touch them. Vereshchagin was an academy graduate, and his paintings were absolutely academic, bearing total historical credibility. Apart from that, he was a great ethnography enthusiast, so in his paintings, he was expressing characters' personalities with their costumes. His Hunter with a Falcon painting is one of the most famous work from Turkestan cycle. The costume itself is a theater, so picturesque and spectacular, there is not a single item that random or extra. All of it, hats, pants, and camisole, and the costume reflects this man's personality, strong and brave person, and at the same time, very exotic. Nikolai Kludov is another Russian artist who we should thank for his extensive ethnographic material. He was paying a great attention at our nation's traditions, male and female costumes with national headwear. Kludov used to depict married women in long dresses and kimisheks, whereas young girls on his paintings were wearing fur hat, burik. Men would be dressed in shapans of different colors and takiyas, and felt hats, kalpaks on their heads. The artist's works demonstrate how knowledgeable he was. The era of later nomads has brought a female open skirt, beldemshe, into Kazakh costume. Talking of the latter, we can say that Kazakh costume has indeed encompassed the best examples of nomads' clothing. The most essential and crucial attribute of man's wardrobe was a belt. Leather belts, fabric belts, decorated ones, all kind of belts. Apart from girding up the clothes, belt had a protective function. Older men's belts were called kisiye. It was a very distinctive thing. Man could attach a powder case to his kisiye, a knife in sheath, a purse, and of course, a hygiene kit. That was every man's attribute. Young men, unmarried ones, they didn't wear kisiyes. Not only was Nikolai Kludov a talented artist, but also a great teacher. In 1921, he opened his school where he taught many famous Kazakhstan artists, and Abylkhan Kosteyev was among one of them. So when has Kludov met Kosteyev? He has met a young man with no education. What did Kludov see in Kosteyev? He saw his first drawings. There was nothing to draw on. Villages' aksakals were not approving of his works. Islam prohibits paintings, so how he is drawing his first works? He was drawing them on the ground, with a stick. He used coal on any surface he could make a use of. Abylkhan Kosteyev, the Kazakh people's artist, one of the founder of Kazakh painting. From the very childhood, he loved to draw, and this passion, at the end of the day, has defined his future. In his works, Kosteyev has always attempted to showcase the beauty of his motherland and highlight cultural and traditional features of his people. Because of his work, portraits of prominent figures of the past were preserved. Amangildi Imanov's portrait, Shokan Ualikhanov's portrait, and Young Abay are among the most valuable Kosteyev's works. Portraits have a special place in Kosteyev's life. He made a portrait of a young Abay, and the portrait was drawn in 1943. Abay is wearing a traditional attire, holding Quran in his hands. And I am very puzzled. How the censorship allowed this prohibited image of Abay? There was only one graphic depiction of Abay, a small 3x4 photo featuring old Abay. And this exact picture was a basis for all Abay portraits that artists have drawn. But Kosteyev wasn't doing this. He was thinking about how Abay could look like when he was young. There is a regular phenomenon in world culture when artworks of famous artists are being modernized and continue to live in a new context. This is something that is very common in fashion industry. Take Warhol's work, for instance, which have appeared in Dior collections, clothes prints featuring works of Vincent van Gogh and Claude Monet. Similar experiments are extremely popular in the world, and Kazakhstan is not an exception. Today, we are going to meet artists who reproduce famous paintings on clothes. This kind of art is more of graphics, still life, and some bigger pictures. We are attempting to develop this movement in our society, trying to popularize pictures. We love to depict yurts, girls in national costumes, and we want to instill this in our society too. Aisha Galimbayeva is one of Kazakh artists we need to talk about specifically. She has become the first professional cinema artist. Her work includes Love Poem, Jigit Girl, It Happened in Shugla. The main theme of her work is Kazakh women and national arts. And it can easily be seen in Kumi's Bowl. We are proud of our era and people's talents. Her main works are dasturkhans, still lives, national and traditional drawings, as well as women and young girls engaged in some craft, always wearing traditional costumes. What strikes me the most is that Aisha Galimbayeva's paintings are big ones. It is a pastel art. Pastel is not about monumentality, but that is her style. I think that it is probably because she can work faster with pastels. Impulsive, spirited, emotional works. They have lots of red color, and actually red is very common in national costumes. And the second artist, in whose works national costume plays a significant role, is Gulfairuz Ismailova. In the 70s, Gulfairuz Ismailova worked as a senior artist at Kazakh Opera and Ballet Theater. She was creating sketches for Yer Targın, Road of Friendship, Kız Jibek, and others. And these works give us another opportunity to trace the history of national costume. Being a professional artist, Gulfairuz meticulously studied the costumes she was drawing. Portraits have a special place among her works. Omarova, in Gulfairuz Ismailova's interpretation, is wearing a strict dress and a long white headscarf covering her hair. Chopin Jandarbekova is dressed in frilly Kazakh national costume. Different paintings precisely retranslate women's personalities, highlighting their social statuses. Young females would wear frilly dresses with dropped waistlines. It was very beautiful. The sleeves were also frilly. Older women would wear dresses of a more relaxed cut. Camisole was essential. Fitted camisole, then chapan. Furs, of course, made of large skins and smaller fur animals' skin. Takia was a female headwear. Also, for the first year of marriage, women would wear a very particular headwear called kasab. It was almost forgotten. Then, women would wear kimishek. In her drawings, Gulfairuz Ismailova transferred the theatricality of the costume and portrait genre. That was the case with her Kazakh waltz, painting featuring vivid and lively Soviet dancer, Shara Zhiankulova. She is dressed in bright national costume and dark camisole embroidered with golden ornaments. Bright pink dress with ruffles demonstrates how light her movements were. Her headwear borik is decorated with feathers, and her hands are adorned with bracelets and rings. As Olga Baturina says, the artist managed to convey plasticity, tenderness, softness, and warmth. And the colors the artist used were not chosen randomly. She picked the brightest ones, the most vivid and optimistic ones. Modern artists work with meanings. And where do they get those meanings from is a completely different business. However, a portrait featuring historical costume has disappeared from Kazakh art as a genre. However, I still see that certain artists are working in historical genres. Dosbol Kasimov, Nurgozhin, Nurlan Kalibayev. But it is more of entertaining paintings. Historical plots are now used as theatrical plots. Historical portraits is not that current today. Kazakh artists are more engaged into mythology. They are interested in nomadic culture and lifestyle. In works like these, they can depict character, ancient beliefs, national mentality, and special features of a traditional Kazakh costume. Depiction of a female takes a special place in the work of local artists. Woman symbolizes beauty, maternity, and purity. If there is something that artist wants to tell this world, he will find the means and techniques. In the art of 21st century, there are lots of movements and styles. Sometimes they intertwine, forming something completely new and extraordinary. Am I wearing now the results of today's art escapade? Isn't it a great way of combining painting and costume? See you soon!